In the heart of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, a young Latina waitress was seconds away from losing everything she'd worked for. What started as a quiet dinner service quickly turned into public humiliation when the arrogant manager decided to make an example of her in front of a room full of recording phones. But Jade Moreno wasn't just a server trying to make ends meet. For 3 years, she had operated as the backbone of Luminous restaurant, responsible for maintaining dignity and grace under pressure that would break most people. Her quiet strength had been tested countless times, but never like this. When Eli Hastings attempted to destroy her reputation in front of Manhattan's elite, he didn't realize he was humiliating someone who had caught the attention of the most powerful person in the room. Jade launched a defense of human dignity that unleashed consequences far beyond what anyone expected. The unassuming man in worn jeans at table 7 wasn't just another customer, he was Lyle Kane, CEO of Meridian Hospitality Group, the company that owned the very restaurant where Jade was being fired. What began as a routine performance review transformed into a corporate reckoning that would change everything. After that night, the restaurant industry would never forget the name Moreno, the moment when quiet courage met ultimate justice. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're watching from. This story will make you reflect on life, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's story might just top this one. The clatter of silverware against ceramic plates created a symphony of controlled chaos in Luminous, one of Manhattan's most coveted fusion restaurants. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables filled with the city's elite, their conversations flowing as smoothly as the expensive wine in their glasses. But tonight, the usual elegant hum was about to shatter. "You're done here, Moreno." Eli Hastings' voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade. His perfectly styled hair and pressed suit commanded attention as he stood in the center of the dining room, pointing an accusatory finger at a young Latina woman in a crisp white uniform. "Pack your things and get out." Jade Moreno stood frozen, her hand still clutching the water pitcher she'd been refilling. Around her, conversation stopped mid-sentence. Phone cameras emerged from designer handbags, capturing what promised to be prime social media content. The whispers began immediately. What did she do? Is that the manager? Someone's getting fired? At table 7, a man in worn jeans and a faded jacket sat quietly, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee cup. His presence had gone largely unnoticed all evening, just another face in the crowd. Unremarkable except for his careful attention to everything happening around him. Now his dark eyes focused intently on the unfolding scene. Jade's voice, when she finally spoke, was steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Mr. Hastings, we're just what? Embarrassing this establishment. Making a scene over some vagrant who wandered in here." Eli's face flushed red, his volume increasing. With each word, "I don't pay you to argue with paying customers or coddle people who don't belong here." The man at table 7, Mr. Kane, according to the reservation, set down his cup with deliberate care. His expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his posture. He was listening now with the intensity of someone gathering evidence. Jade's shoulders straightened. For a moment, the restaurant held its breath. Then, quietly, she untied her apron. "I understand," she said, her dignity intact even as her world crumbled. "But I don't regret helping him." As she folded the apron with practiced precision, her mind drifted back to earlier that evening. 6 hours earlier. The pre-dinner rush was in full swing when Jade first noticed him. He'd been seated at table 7 despite his casual appearance, something that had clearly irritated Eli from the moment he walked in. While other servers avoided his section, Jade approached with her usual warm smile. "Good evening. Can I start you with something to drink?" The man looked up, surprised by her genuine tone. "Coffee, please, just black." "Of course. Are you ready to order, or would you like a few more minutes?" He studied the menu, clearly overwhelmed by the prices. Jade noticed his hesitation. The way he carefully counted bills in his wallet when he thought no one was looking. She'd seen that look before in her own mirror, years ago when she was supporting her mother and younger sister on tips alone. "The soup special is really excellent tonight," she offered quietly, "and it comes with fresh bread." Their eyes met, and in that moment, an understanding passed between them. He wasn't just another customer, he was someone trying to maintain his dignity in a place that made him feel small. "That sounds perfect," he said gratefully. As Jade walked away, Eli materialized beside her like a storm cloud. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "Don't waste time on table 7. Focus on the tables that actually tip." "He's a customer, Mr. Hastings, same as everyone else." Eli's eyes narrowed. "He's taking up space. Get his order and move on." But Jade couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. When she brought his soup, she noticed him observing the restaurant with unusual attention, not the casual glances of a diner, but the focused assessment of someone conducting business. "Have you been here before?" she asked, refilling his water glass. "First time," he replied. "I'm jetting to know the place." As the evening progressed, Jade found herself drawn back to table 7. The mannequin asked thoughtful questions about the restaurant, the staff, the culture. When a group of investment bankers at the neighboring table began making loud, disparaging comments about his appearance, Jade positioned herself between them, her presence a subtle but clear message. "Is everything all right here?" she asked. The bankers with professional politeness, though her eyes held a warning. "Fine," one of them muttered, appropriately chastened. Kane watched this interaction with growing interest. When Jade returned to check on him, he asked quietly, "Why do you do that?" "Do what?" "Stand up for people, especially when it costs you something." Jade paused, surprised by the directness of the question. "Because everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. It doesn't matter what they're wearing or how much money they have, even when your boss tells you not to." She glanced toward Eli, who was glaring at her from across the room. "Especially then." Kane nodded slowly, as if she'd just confirmed something important. "You know, most people reveal their true character when they think no one's watching. But you're consistent. That's rare." Before Jade could respond, Eli appeared at her elbow. "Moreno, table 12 needs their check, and the couple at 6 is still waiting for their appetizer. Stop chatting and do your job." The humiliation burned, but Jade kept her composure. As she turned to leave, Kane's voice stopped her. "Thank you," he said, "simply for treating me like a human being." Now, standing in the center of the dining room with her apron folded and her employment terminated, Jade felt the weight of that moment. She had made her choice, and she would live with the consequences. Eli was still ranting, playing to his audience of shocked diners and recording phones. "This is what happens when staff think they know better than management. We have standards. Here, people, excuse me." The quiet voice cut through Eli's tirade like a whisper in a thunderstorm. Kane had risen from his seat, his presence suddenly commanding attention despite his modest appearance. "I said, excuse me." His tone remained, calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. "Could you help me understand what just happened here?" Earlier that evening, before the confrontation that would change everything, Jade had been moving through her shift with the quiet efficiency that had made her one of Luminous's most reliable servers. She navigated between tables with practiced grace, refilling water glasses, taking orders, and managing the controlled chaos that was Friday night in Manhattan's dining scene. The restaurant buzzed with its usual energy, deals being struck over appetizers, anniversaries celebrated with champagne, first dates unfolding over carefully curated small plates. Jade had learned to read the rhythms of her tables, to anticipate needs before they were voiced, to become invisible while remaining indispensable. But table 7 was different. When Kane had first walked in, the hostess Mel had hesitated at her podium. Her nervous glance toward Eli spoke volumes about the restaurant's unspoken hierarchy. The man didn't fit the typical Luminous profile: no designer clothes, no expensive watch, no air of casual wealth that marked most of their clientele. "Do you have a reservation?" Mel had asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Kane, table for 1. She'd checked her list twice before, reluctantly leading him to table 7, the small corner table usually reserved for walk-ins or last-minute additions. As she seated him, Jade caught the exchange from across the room and felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. She'd seen this dance before, the subtle ways people were made to feel unwelcome, the quiet cruelties that happened in plain sight. Kane seemed aware of the dynamics at play but didn't react to them. Instead, he settled into his chair with the patience of someone accustomed to being underestimated. He studied the room with careful eyes, taking in details that most diners would miss: the stress lines around servers' eyes, the way Eli monitored every interaction, the invisible tensions that ran beneath Luminous's polished surface. When Jade approached his table, she made a conscious choice to treat him exactly as she would any other guest. Her smile was genuine, her attention focused, her service impeccable. As she took his order and brought his coffee, she noticed him watching her work with other tables, observing her interactions with both customers and staff. "You enjoy this?" he said during one of her visits to refill his cup. It wasn't a question. "What? Do you mean taking care of people?" "You're good at it, but more than that, you seem to genuinely care about making people feel comfortable." Jade paused, surprised by the observation. Most customers barely acknowledged her as a person, let alone noticed her motivations. "I suppose I do. There's something satisfying about making someone's evening a little brighter, even when they don't appreciate it." She glanced around the dining room, taking in the usual mix of demanding customers, dismissive glances, and the casual rudeness that came with serving people who saw themselves as inherently superior. "Especially then," she said quietly. Kane nodded, filing away her response. "Tell me about yourself. What brought you here?" The question caught her off guard. In 3 years at Luminous, no customer had ever asked about her life beyond the immediate transaction. She found herself sharing more than she intended: about growing up helping her mother run a food truck in Queens, about working multiple jobs to put her sister through college, about the dreams she'd put on hold to ensure her family's stability. "And you?" she asked, turning the conversation back to him. "What do you do?" "I'm in the restaurant business," he said simply. "I'm evaluating some new opportunities." Before she could ask more, Eli appeared at her shoulder like a dark cloud. "Moreno, what are you doing?" "Just taking care," Table 12 has been waiting 5 minutes for their wine, and you're here having a chat. His voice carried the particular edge that meant he was performing for the room. This isn't a social club move. The dismissal stung, not just for its rudeness, but for the way it diminished her in front of Kane. She felt heat rise in her cheeks as she excused herself, but Kane's expression remained thoughtful rather than embarrassed for her. As the evening progressed, the tension between Jade's natural instincts and Eli's expectations grew more pronounced. When she brought Kane an extra roll without being asked, Eli caught her. When she lingered at his table to ensure he had everything he needed, Eli materialized with a warning glare. When other customers began making increasingly loud comments about Kane's presence, Eli made it clear that Jade was to stop enabling. The situation. The breaking point came when a group of young professionals at the adjacent table began a running commentary clearly meant to be overheard. I can't believe they let just anyone in here now. Seriously, what's next? Are we going to start seeing food truck workers? Maybe he's lost. Someone should help him find a McDonald's. Their laughter was sharp and cruel, designed to wound. Jade watched Kane's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly, but he continued eating his soup with quiet dignity. The scene was achingly familiar, seeing her mother endure similar treatment from customers who thought a food truck operator was somehow less worthy of respect. Without thinking, Jade stepped between the tables. Is everything satisfactory with your meals? She asked the group, her voice professional but firm. Fine, one of them muttered, suddenly less bold under her direct gaze. Wonderful. If you need anything else, please let me know. She turned back to Kane's table. How's your soup? Delicious, he said quietly, and she caught the gratitude in his eyes. It was this moment that Eli witnessed from across the room, Jade standing between Kane and his tormentors. Her posture protective, her message clear. It was the moment that sealed her fate. As she walked away from Kane's table, she felt a strange sense of peace. She had made her choice, knowing it would cost her, but some things were worth more than a job, and human dignity was one of them. Kane called her over one more time before the night exploded into chaos. I need to ask you something, he said, his voice low and serious. Why do you do this work? What do you mean? You're clearly intelligent, compassionate, capable. You could probably succeed in any number of fields, so why choose something where people treat you as invisible? Jade considered the question carefully. Because invisible doesn't mean powerless, she finally said. Sometimes the most important work happens when no one's watching. Sometimes a kind word or a moment of dignity can change someone's entire day. Maybe that doesn't sound like much, but it matters to me. Kane studied her face for a long moment. It matters more than you know, he said softly. 20 minutes later, Eli would make his fatal mistake, and Kane would reveal just how much her quiet strength had meant to someone who'd been watching all along. Eli's confidence faltered for just a moment as Kane stood at table 7. The man's quiet authority seemed to fill the space around him, creating a pocket of stillness in the otherwise chaotic dining room. Phone cameras remained trained on the scene, capturing every word for social media posterity. I'm sorry, but who are you exactly? Eli demanded, his voice carrying the particular condescension he reserved for people he considered beneath his notice. This is a private matter between management and staff. Kane didn't immediately respond. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a simple black wallet. From it, he pulled a business card and placed it carefully on the white tablecloth. Even from across the room, Jade could see the subtle shift in Eli's expression as he read it. Lyle Kane, the man said, calmly, CEO, Meridian Hospitality Group. The words hung in the air like a dropped glass, creating a moment of perfect, crystalline silence before the implications shattered across the room. Jade felt her knees weaken. Meridian didn't just own Luminous, they owned a portfolio of high-end restaurants across 3 states. Kane wasn't just any customer. He was the man who could close the restaurant with a single phone call. Eli's face cycled through. Several colors red to white, to a sickly green as he processed what he'd just heard. Mr. Kane, that is. I didn't realize. No, Kane said quietly, you didn't. And that's exactly the problem. He turned to address the dining room, his voice carrying easily across the suddenly silent space. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption to your evening. I'm conducting what you might call a quality assessment of our establishments. What you've just witnessed is illuminating. Mel, the hostess, had gone pale at her podium. Other servers had frozen in place, water pitchers and wine bottles forgotten in their hands. The customers sat transfixed, phones still recording, knowing they were witnessing something that would be dissected on social media for weeks to come. Eli began a desperate sir, if you'll just let me explain the situation, please. Do, Kane said, settling back into his chair with the relaxed patience of a man holding all the cards. I'm very interested in your explanation. Well, you see, this employee Jade, she was being insubordinate. She argued with customers, created a scene, made people uncomfortable. I had to maintain order. Stop. Kane's single word cut through Eli's babbling like a blade. Let me tell you what I saw tonight. He stood again, his presence commanding absolute attention. I saw a server who treated every customer with equal dignity, regardless of their appearance or perceived status. I saw someone who stood up to bullies without being asked, who protected a stranger's dignity at the cost of her own comfort. I saw someone who, when faced with a choice between following orders and doing what was right, chose character over compliance. Kane's gaze swept across the dining room before settling on Eli. And I saw a manager who was so concerned with appearances, so focused on projecting an image of exclusivity, that he was willing to humiliate one of his best employees in front of a room full of people, all to impress customers who, frankly, don't represent the values this company wants to embody. The silence that followed was deafening. Jade felt as though she were watching the scene unfold from outside herself. Unable to process the dramatic reversal of fortune playing out before her eyes, Kane pulled out his phone and made a brief call. "Sarah, it's Lyle. I need you to send someone to Luminous immediately. Full management review." He hung up and looked directly at Eli. "Congratulations, Mr. Hastings. You've just provided me with a masterclass in how not to lead a team. But sir, I was just you. We're just what? Protecting the restaurant's reputation by publicly humiliating an employee who was providing exceptional customer service." Kane's voice remained calm, but the steel beneath was unmistakable. "Tell me, what exactly did she do wrong?" Eli's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. He looked around the room as if seeking support from the other diners, but found only uncomfortable stares and the unblinking eyes of phone cameras. She was spending too much time with you. I mean, with that customer. She wasn't following protocol, the protocol of treating people poorly based on their appearance." Kane's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's an interesting business model. I wonder how our board would feel about that approach." The sound of the restaurant's front door opening drew everyone's attention. Two people in dark suits had entered. Corporate representatives. Moving with the efficient purpose of those accustomed to handling crises, Jade watched as they approached Kane, spoke briefly with him in low tones, then turned their attention to Eli. "Mr. Hastings," one of them said crisply, "we need to have a conversation now." As Eli was escorted away from the dining room, his face a mask of barely controlled panic, Kane turned his attention to Jade. She stood frozen where she'd been throughout the entire confrontation, her folded apron still clutched in her hands. "Ms. Moreno," Kane said gently, "would you mind stepping outside with me? I believe we have some things to discuss." The last thing Jade saw as she followed Kane toward the exit was the dining room full of customers, still seated at their tables, phones still recording, all of them witnesses to a moment when justice had arrived as quietly as a whisper and struck with the force of thunder. As they stepped through the front doors of Luminous onto the busy Manhattan sidewalk, Jade felt the cool night air hit her face and realized she'd been holding her breath for what felt like hours. Behind them, the restaurant hummed with excited conversation as diners processed what they'd just witnessed. "I imagine you have some questions," Kane said, his voice returning to the gentle tone she remembered from their earlier conversations. Jade looked at him seeing past the humble clothes to the quiet strength that had been there all along. "Just one, actually," she said. "Why?" Kane smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him all evening. "Because sometimes the only way to know who someone really is to see how they treat people when they think it doesn't matter. You passed that test in ways I never could have imagined." The coffee shop was a study in contrasts to Luminous, warm, unpretentious, filled with the comfortable sounds of casual conversation and the gentle hiss of espresso machines. Kane sat across from Jade at a corner table, two steaming cups between them, the chaos of the evening feeling like something from another lifetime. "I still can't quite believe what happened," Jade said, wrapping her hands around her mug for warmth. 6 hours ago, I was a waitress, and now you're unemployed." Kane finished with a wry smile. "I'm sorry about that. The circumstances weren't exactly ideal." "Are you sorry?" "I mean," Jade studied his face carefully, "because it seemed like you knew exactly what you were doing back there." Kane was quiet for a moment, considering his response. "I've been in the restaurant business for 25 years, he finally said. "I started as a busboy in a diner in Cleveland, worked my way up through every position you can imagine. When I took over Meridian 6 months ago, it was because the previous leadership had lost sight of what hospitality actually means." He paused to take a sip of his coffee. "We had reports of staff mistreatment at several locations, complaints about discriminatory service, hostile work environments, management that prioritized profit over people. The board asked me to investigate personally to see if the problems were systemic or isolated. So tonight was a test. Though, not the kind you might think." Kane leaned forward slightly. "I wasn't testing you, Jade. You were never the variable in question. I was testing the system, the management, the culture, the values that were being practiced versus the ones we claim to represent." Jade felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "How many other restaurants have you visited like this?" 7. "And unfortunately, what I witnessed tonight wasn't unique. It was just more blatant than usual." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching pedestrians hurry past the window, each lost in their own urgent Friday night pursuits. Finally, Kane spoke again. "I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. Meridian needs someone to help us rebuild our corporate culture. Someone who understands what good service looks like from the ground up, who can train managers and staff in the kind of hospitality that creates genuine connections rather than transactional exchanges. He met her eyes directly. Someone who chooses dignity over convenience, even when it costs them something. Jade felt her heart racing. What exactly are you offering? Director of Guest Experience and Staff Development? You'd travel to our locations, assess current practices, develop training programs, and work directly with management to implement changes. Full benefits, company car, salary that's, well, significantly more than you were making at Luminous. The offer was beyond anything Jade had imagined possible. 6 hours ago, her biggest concern had been whether she'd make enough in tips to help her sister with next semester's textbooks. Now she was being offered a position that could change not just her life, but potentially the lives of countless other service workers. I'm honored, she said slowly, but I have to ask why me. I don't have corporate experience, or management training, or you have something more valuable than any of that. Kane interrupted. You have integrity. You understand that how we treat people when we think no one's watching is the truest measure of who we are. That's not something you can teach in a seminar or learn from a textbook. Jade thought about her mother, working 16-hour days at the food truck, never compromising on quality, even when money was tight. About her sister, trusting Jade to help her achieve dreams neither of them had thought possible. About all the servers and cooks and bussers and hostesses, who went to work every day hoping to be treated with basic human dignity. What happened to Eli, she asked. He's no longer with the company, effective immediately. Kane's tone was matter-of-fact. His replacement will be someone who understands that respect flows both ways from management to staff, and from staff. 2 guests, and Luminous will be used as a pilot program for our new training initiatives. If you accept the position, it would be your first project. The symmetry was almost too perfect, returning to the place where she'd been humiliated. But this time with the authority to ensure it never happened to anyone else. I need to think about it, Jade said, though she already knew her answer. Kane nodded. Of course, take all the time you need. He reached into his jacket and pulled out another business card, this one with his direct contact information. Call me when you've decided. As they prepared to leave, Kane caught her attention one more time. Jade, what you did tonight's standing up for someone you thought was just another customer, protecting their dignity when you had nothing to gain from it. That's the kind of leadership this industry needs. Don't let anyone convince you it was just doing your job. It was doing what was right. And that's something entirely different. 2 weeks later, Jade stood in the entrance of Luminous, wearing a crisp business suit instead of a server's uniform. The restaurant looked exactly the same crystal chandeliers, the same elegant tables, the same Friday night energy. But everything felt different. Mel, the hostess, did a double take when she saw her. Jade, what are you doing here? Working, Jade said with a smile. I'll be training the new management staff this week. She looked around the dining room, taking in the familiar rhythms of service, the dance of servers and customers that she knew so well. At table 7 Kane's Tabula, young couple was sharing dessert, laughing at some private joke. The table that had witnessed her lowest moment was now just another place where people came to create memories. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. Saw the video? Mom's crying happy tears. She says she always knew you were destined for something special. Can't wait to hear all about your first day. The video. Of course it had gone viral at the moment when Eli's arrogance met Kane's quiet justice, when years of unchecked power dynamics came crashing down in a single revelatory conversation. The internet had dubbed it the waitress who won, though Jade preferred to think of it as the night dignity fought back. She walked through the dining room one more time before heading to the back office for her first meeting with the new management team. At each table, she saw not just customers and servers, but human beings deserving of respect, kindness, and dignity. It was a simple concept really, but one that could transform an entire industry, if enough people were willing to embrace it. The quiet strength that had sustained her through years of minimum wage jobs and casual dismissals had become something more, a voice for change, a standard for others to follow, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin with a single act of kindness toward a stranger. As she settled into her new role, Jade carried with her the lesson that had started it all. True character isn't revealed when the lights are on and everyone's watching. It's shown in the small moments, the quiet choices, the times when doing the right thing costs something but we do it anyway. Sometimes your lowest moment is someone else's test. Pass it with grace, and doors you never imagined will open. More stories like this one. Hit like and subscribe.